Hello, welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is episode 48, Your Lexicon. And this is a continuing series of ruminations and kind of just general kind of thoughts about things as related to my work. I'm Bruce Gemmel. I'm a researcher, draftsman, model maker in architecture and related fields. And I've just been doing a series of talks about just some ideas that have kind of been pertinent to me in the course of my development through my work. Anyway, your lexicon. Basically, it's an important aspect of the way in which you express yourself. But we'll talk about that. And for the people, let me just give a quick idea of what that is. It's a noun that refers to the vocabulary of a person, language, or branch of knowledge. And it's I think it's a Greek word. I'm not sure, but basically, it's kind of like it's the way in which you mold that which is important to the way in which you will express yourself. I think it's important that people understand that the way in which you do that is very, very important. I think the people who kind of study things with great depth understand that. So anyway, so I gave a hint. I read a little bit of the piece that I'm going to read more. This is from the beginning of chapter 1, The Aims of Education by Alfred North Whitehead. And it was actually Whitehead is probably one of the thinkers who's probably had one of the, if not the greatest impact, some of the greatest impact on me. Today we saw in Science Magazine that it's the 100th anniversary of the beautiful book that Julie recently got me, The History of Science. That was one of the 3 important books that were written along with Adventures of Ideas and Process and Reality. So 100 years. And so happy birthday, The History of Science, where, basically Whitehead kind of charted us through the 400 years from the 17th, 16th, 17th century, 18th, 19th, and 20th through to where we are in terms of the way in which we came from, where we had been in the medieval times, post-Renaissance, in terms of way in which what he calls the century of genius in the 17th century laid the groundwork for the explosion and kind of development of science. So anyway, we have to remember that the valuable intellectual development is self-development, and it mostly takes place between the ages of 16 and 30. So that's one piece, but it's related to a few pages later when he says, in scientific training, the first thing to do with an idea is to prove it, but allow me for one moment to extend the meaning of prove. I mean to prove its worth. Now, an idea is not much unless the propositions in which it is embedded are true. Accordingly, an essential part of the proof of an idea is the proof, either by experience or by logic, of the truth of propositions. But and this is the piece I just love. But it is not essential that this proof of this truth should constitute the first introduction to the idea. After all, its assertion by the authority of respectable teachers is sufficient evidence to begin with. In our first contact with a set of propositions, we commence by appreciating their importance. Right? So this is kind of a little bit different than what Feynman says when he kind of says, like, if, he's much more kind of like pragmatic in the fact that, like, if something doesn't work, it's useless, forget it. But there's an appreciation of the proposition. This, I think, kind of like harkens back to the fact that Whitehead was very, very devoted to the ideas of Hume. And you could probably see that when you think about that. So we do not attempt in the strict sense to prove or to disprove anything unless its importance makes it worthy of that honor. So it kind of brings up the fact that sometimes we forget that the investigation compels us. The investigation kind of provokes us, has consequence. And there's usually sometimes that sense where, like, maybe we get to the point where we kind of feel like if it doesn't pass muster, that somehow we failed it because there was such promise. Now, there are other people who contend this is kind of like probably, I think, like in reading Sabine Hassenfelder's book, where she kind of thinks that things get a little bit ahead of themselves in other ways, especially it relates to mathematics, that somehow, I'm quoting from Alfred North Whitehead in Aims of Education. All right. So, it's one of our great friends here, who we actually just saw on the train riding back from the Met. So, let's just say again, we do not attempt in this strict sense to prove or to disprove anything unless its importance makes it worthy of that honor. These two processes of proof in the narrow sense and the appreciation do not require a rigid separation in time. Both can be proceeded with nearly concurrently, but and this is the piece I love, but insofar as either process must have the priority, it should be that of appreciation by use. So, not just do we aimlessly wander in the void, but what we do is we kind of set out with an appreciation. What I call in terms of organic design thinking is we have an affection for something. Something compels us, something kind of gives us an inkling of the fact that we prefer that particular approach or that particular artifact. So, with that as a beginning, we're going to talk about your lexicon and its consequence in terms of who you are. I think there's a quote by a culinary expert named Savarin, which I used to see on the real Iron Chef, not the fake later Iron Chef, the one that had Morimoto and all those guys on it, where he said, "Tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are." And I would say that this week and next week, where we're going to talk about your lexicon and the reader, I think if I get to learn your vocabulary, I get to get inside your lexicon, and I know what you read, I know who you are. I would say the same thing goes in that case. So this is a little bit longer introduction than usual. I apologize for that. But let's get to the most important part, the part everyone likes because they get to see Julie, because honestly, I mean, as soon as you see Julie, you'll know what I mean. This is this week, this week in Julie. So what's new in this week in Julie, my loved one?
Oh, thanks, Pete.
You're welcome.
I'm right here.
See, now you know why, right?
Thanks. I'm bringing it. You can hold it, and then we'll both talk about it. How's that? Would you like to hold it for me, little boy?
One second, I'm just writing a response here.
Oh, is someone here?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. Hello.
Okay.
To put on my V-neck.
So let's hold it up. Hi, Julie. Look.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, we're just kind of traveling on the train. Anyway, but that's. Let me show you my copy of my card.
Bruce's copy
heavily annotated. You know, it's like you kind of can hardly, if you can see, it's like
has actually a superimposition of Bruce's lexicon net over Whitehead's lexicon.
Well, you know, honestly, one of the people I find who is probably, in my regard, one of the reasons I say this is that, and I mean, our friend who's listening knows this title about process and reality.
What about the science that I just got you?
Yes. Yeah. Process and reality, which was a series of very prestigious. It was called the Gifford Lectures. Not sure what year it was, but the Gifford Lectures is is a lecture series that takes place. In fact, another great Gifford lecture
I forgot my
was
tea.
was done by a guy named John Dupre, who was a interesting character. He studies metaphysics and biology, and he gave a series of process-based lectures that I think were either this year or last year. They're really fascinating. So I'm kind of still going through. I think there's 5 or 6 parts. Anyway, so this week in Julie.
Okay. Can you hold it up?
Yes, my loved one.
And we didn't get
Also,
to show our friend because normally we'd show our friend on the way out.
Also,
yes.
Right. Now, as is our policy, we do not use people's names unless they want us to say so.
Yes, we don't ever use anyone's name.
So
we say
we can use
friend.
we can use our friend, or we can use their kind of like their kind of title or whatever.
Everyone remains as we like to be, she said on screen, anonymous.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So talk to us about
a bit of glare maybe if you hold it closer.
Well, that was terrible.
Yeah,
there we go.
That is better. Okay, so I basically finished this drawing of mine tonight. I did not have time to sign or date it yet. That'll happen on Halloween. This drawing is actually a nécessaire of kleptoplasty, which is a nécessaire, for those of you who are just tuning in, is a case that holds multiple tools for everyday use, travel use, cartographic tools, architecture tools, writing, drafting, sewing tools, knives, scissors, ointments, combs. It's just a marvel. In a very small, very luxurious case, it's kind of the Swiss Army knife for the exquisitely well appointed. So, like a nécessaire that has tools.
Swiss Army knife for the exquisitely well appointed. That is too cool.
Thanks, Pete.
I love that.
You're welcome to use it.
I would never use it. It's too exquisite for me.
Thank you.
That people would know. It's like, Julie said that. You never said that.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's true though.
So yeah. So what if you had, this is my drawing based on an actual animal. It is the only creature, nicely done, that photosynthesizes like a plant. This is just an amazing thing. I was inspired, as I often am, by a research article in the journal Science. And the research article is about the discovery that the lettuce sea slug, of which I've drawn 2 species, this lettuce sea slug coming down here, and if you'll be happy to raise it up, this completely different looking, but another species of the lettuce sea slug here. And it's called actually Elysia crispata, which I think is very funny because if you picture kind of a crispy iceberg leaf of lettuce that's kind of on target, and they glow with all the chlorophyll of the chloroplast, which they steal from the algae that they eat. Now, they don't just process and eat the algae. They're often in a very nutrient poor environment towards the bottom of the ocean, and food is kind of scarce. What do? They steal, siphon, suck out the chloroplasts from the algae that they eat, and they have evolved rapid evolution of an organ called a kleptosome to store this horde of stolen chloroplasts, which allows them the ability to be their own nécessaire. They are their own well-heeled toolbox for survival in perpetuity. And as far as they know in the research, it's not just hours or days or weeks or months. For the lifespan of the lettuce sea slug, it is a solar-powered slug.
Right, and we have here, it says it looks like molecules taken from, and it's actually, that is the case. I mean, what some people will call horizontal gene transfer or horizontal gene sharing, this idea of kind of like symbiogenesis is actually an idea that comes to us through other people, through Lynn Margulis, to the idea that in fact you take or you absorb advantageously what you need sometimes in times of extreme stress. And as a result, in smaller scale organisms, we see this more
Mm-hmm.
than we do in larger scale organisms. And in fact, a lot of times what happens is these create the opportunity for the flourishing of certain things. In fact, we understand the fact that a lot of the components that make up our bodies, especially in the kind of smaller scale, come from the composition of what were once independent pieces that came together to kind of form a larger thing. Not unlike the building of a lexicon, as
Yeah.
certain networks of words basically kind of like overlay other networks of words, and then eventually, as a result of this, you start to actually create, generate, and sculpt these things as if they, and utilize the plastic component of that
Do you know
aspect.
why?
Because I said so.
Was in the linguistic polis, all roads lead to lexicon amphitheater.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I like
isn't
that.
it
I like
cool,
that.
right?
Yeah.
So
You said your drawings have so much movement. They are, but
thank
like,
you.
they even can have
Try
more
to
movement.
zoom
Look.
in on here. Wait till you hear. Oh, yes, it
That's
does
right,
have a
yeah.
lot of movement. Okay, thank you.
Remember Monty Python when they
Oh,
would do that?
yeah.
Like the drawing was like, "Hello, Mrs. Cutout."
It was very funny.
Yeah.
So up here is
Let's see if we
the
get a detail on that.
kleptosome. Yeah, really, really
Right.
close. And what is key is I actually found one scanning electron micrograph of the actual organ. That is the kleptosome, and it's full of stolen chloroplasts. Now, if you raise it a bit, what I did today, keep on going, is the cameo paintings that are delicately painted on the necessaire itself. Keep on going because it's down here. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Try to get really close with yes. See here, there's a man I drew on horseback. There's a bridge with arches. There's a stand of trees. There are houses. There are cliffs. There are plants. This is in the tiny micro miniature enamel painting on the bottom half
Yes.
of the British necessaire that's in the British wing of the Met.
And rightfully so. Klepto is Greek for stealing, which in fact is
Exactly,
what
yeah.
the process is.
Yes,
Is that
exactly.
because again, photosynthesis does not take place in these organisms.
No.
In this case, the kleptoplast, right, is actually the result of the organism, the organ that was generated within this organism to steal, right, the chloroplast and store the chloroplast.
Here's the kicker on exactly what.
So the kleptosome is basically the what is it?
It's the satchel.
It's the satchel that the criminal basically puts. Let's just say
in the loop.
Let's just say
really
if you were at the Louvre.
Yeah,
and you were kind of stealing,
the Louvre, yes.
Right, exactly.
In the middle of the afternoon,
right.
under the cover of late afternoon,
under cover of extreme morning.
Of extreme morning, with a giant 2-story gleaming steel ladder, at the base of which are 4 scooters.
Right, to make your getaway on.
Oh God, what a bunch of clowns.
Well,
anyway, wait.
That would never happen at the Met.
No, it would not. Here's the beauty to extend this. When you grow a phantom organ, because before the growth of the kleptosome, the sea slug could not store its stolen chloroplast.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to use them and constantly take in more.
But now it's developed the other organ, which allows it to kind of be stored. Exactly.
Now, what is...
Hold on a second. Oh. Trying to generate an organ. No, it hasn't worked.
It's right there.
No, I look at it this way. Like, if you could generate any organ, what would it be?
Second brain.
That would be scary.
Yeah,
I think people would actually have to try to stop that. That would be scary.
They've tried to stop my first brain.
Exactly.
So.
Liver. Okay, liver.
Good.
Okay.
Actually, a second heart is very practical because you would actually use one for a lifetime. Then the second heart would kick in and you have an incredible second lifetime. The new heart. Wait,
isn't the Grinch, his heart grew
like 5 sizes. Wait, in the cameo at the bottom of the necessaire, all the figures that I hinted at are ghosts of the actual painting that is on there. Think of the ashen silhouettes. I was thinking of Wayang Kulit, or Javanese shadow puppet theater. I
Oh,
did these like shadow puppets.
that's so
So
cool.
so all you see are the shadows of this
Right.
entire scene that is in the
Mm, mm,
bottom
mm, mm,
of the necessaire.
mm.
So it is
Brilliant.
illusionistic.
Nice. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Classic Marx Brothers.
Absolutely. Anyone
Doesn't
not
go to Marx
comfortable?
Brothers
Right.
doesn't deserve to
Don't
live.
don't belong here.
Yeah,
All right. So now we get into the. I mean, this is actually very instructive because the ability to find those things, to appropriate those things that are necessary, is very much. I mean, I wouldn't say that one steals words, right? But one appropriates
A
words
lot of people
in order.
still words.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, I think the term is more appropriate is that you steal words, you
Yeah.
appropriate words in order to basically express those functions by which you express those concepts and ideas that are most necessary for you. I mean, each person will basically define for themselves not just the words that they choose, but also they'll kind of probably modify to great degree and have specific consequence to the way in which those words are defined. Oh, sorry, P. Oh, P. P. Okay. So one of the things I did was I kind of started thinking about the fact, and based on, oh, P, you gonna be okay?
I swallowed one.
Oh, okay. Is there a bone in the T?
Yeah.
Tea doesn't have bones.
It's a T-bone.
A T-bone. Nice. Okay. I hope you live long enough to kind of celebrate that one, right? Okay. So, I started thinking about, like, if I was to kind of say, oh, good night, my friend.
Oh.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
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 Sleep,
Pleasant
dreams.
Thanks for joining us. Or groovy, trippy dreams.
Right.
It sounds like more groovy,
pleasant
groovy,
pleasant
groovy,
dreams.
trippy dreams.
See you next week. Pleasant dreams. See you next week, my friend. All right. So, in this case, what happens is we're talking about the idea that I thought about some of the words that are kind of important to me, and I kind of was trying to think that these have come across over the course of time, and some of those words were, I guess, the first word that was kind of interesting to me that I kind of started to realize was one. I'd say that it's like curiosity, imagination, and adventure. These were words that really kind of, like, I would say, defined my character. We talked about the idea of an adventurous mind. We'll talk about more of that in detail. But I'd say, let's see, to run them down: imagination, process, metaphor, curiosity, imagination, adventure, compelling, organic, natural and artificial, basically taken from creativity, tolerance, freedom, liberty, consequence, ontology, character, beauty, love, truth, organism, mechanism. These are words that I use every single day, multiple times, in terms of definition of the things that I kind of think about and work on. And I think that, some of these, a good example is natural and artificial, are basically words that I take off the meaning that, Darwin displayed in his book Origin of Species. Other things were basically things I've taken from other places, modified. One of the things I feel I've modified most is that which I would call the metaphor. I see the metaphor as an operation, not in terms of the fact that it's an analogy that exists in our world as a result of being borrowed from the natural world. I believe that metaphor is the basic process by which all things are generated into being. Now, the generative strategy from which all things come, I believe, comes through entanglement within the process of the metaphor. And again, these are things that I've come to kind of understand and kind of make sense in terms of kind of putting my ideas into somewhat of perspective. So, with that in mind, my loved one, how would you say you see your particular lexicon and how that has basically been shaped over the course of your life? And if there's any particular words that have really kind of adopted a fashion or kind of a sense as a result of your particular affinity for it?
Excellent question.
Thank you.
My particular lexicon is a surrealist lexicon.
Mm.
Very, very much so.
Well, I never
The
thought of the complexion.
hyperreal, the surreal,
Yeah.
the juxtaposition of odd and alien things coming together.
Mine's romantic. Mine is a
Okay.
romantic.
Okay.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. Surrealist. Ah,
Yes.
and gothic.
Oh, it's very gothic. It's very
Yes.
intricate. It is labyrinthine.
Yes.
It's spidery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is transformative, and
Mhm.
it is hybridization all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever
Mm-hmm.
I look at anyone or anything, I immediately start to hybridize it in my mind with those things that are either absent and should be there, or those things that are present that I'm rearranging or taking away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm constantly reordering my environment in my mind to make it more palatable,
Oh,
more,
really?
yes,
Palatable to you?
palatable to me.
Absolutely.
That's
Okay,
my
that makes sense. That
lexicon.
makes sense.
More beautiful, more glorious, more grand, more intriguing, and far more interesting than the quotidian that we are all and I am surrounded with.
Mm. So in a way, I mean, it's like it's a composition. You know,
I have
it's
a
a
handout.
basically. Oh, P.
Yeah.
So I would say I never thought of a characterization of my lexicon, but when I think about it, I definitely believe
Mhm.
I'm not a surrealist in that.
That's where I come in.
Yes, but I believe I'm a romantic in that
think so.
sense, in a kind of like
You have kind of a dashing lexicon.
I do. I think so.
It's
You
very
know, I mean,
roguish and
I
it's
think
puckish
yes,
too.
exactly. You know, I kind of like love the idea. I love the word consequence.
Mhm.
And I was it. I remember I kind of came up with a term recently. I called myself graciously arrogant,
I think
which I
that
kind of like.
suits
I
you.
like that. It suits me. It's like I am
Mhm.
graciously arrogant, where I'm arrogant in a thoughtful way.
You're asking me too
Yes, I
about
am.
words.
Say.
Arborizing. It's one of my
Hmm.
favorite words.
Hmm.
The idea of branching tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the word arborizing is so infrequently used that it doesn't even come up on autocorrect. It comes up as wrong, and it tries to say arbor like in Arbor Day, which is one of my favorite holidays. I always like to say, no, thanks, I'm busy. It's Arbor Day. So, but arborizing is a branching metaphor and a metaphorical structure that applies to the human circulatory system, the human respiratory system, the structure of plant leaves, the structure of roots, of everything. It is maps, it's cartographic, it's the fingers on your hand. Arborizing things branch and change. It's cladistic, one of my other favorite words. The idea of imposing a cladogram on your immediate and distant environment. And everything has an arborizing structure, including the words in your lexicon. If you start with certain words, you will arborize those words and they will lead to other things that branch off.
Yeah, I kind of, as I was saying earlier, there's a kind of, there's the idea of like
Epithets.
layers of kind of like,
Yeah.
kind of network structures that
Oh,
they
yeah.
basically
It is
kind of
the
like,
ultimate.
yeah. And I think
organic
that it is
network structure.
exactly, and I
Yeah.
think that way kind of
And
like
the word
seeing,
organic.
yes, is seeing that in the way in which you understand that aspect. But again, so I'd say two things are active. One is the collection of the words, and two, I would say, is kind of like the derivation of the specifics of the meaning for you. It's not that you change the meaning, right, or that the meaning is fixed. One of the great things about words and concepts is they're open to interpretation, and the interpretations are the kind of things that are incredibly beautiful to kind of play with. I think one of the things that I think is a great kind of political legal aspect is that when someone has, say, a law or a rule, is that over time, different interpretations of the meaning of that kind of come into play based on the fact that things have changed since the point where it was laid down. So I think in my case, probably the richest word, again, that's kind of changed the most times over the course of my life is probably, again, the term metaphor. When I first came across it in the work of Ortega Gasset, I came across it in the way in which most people see it in the literary sense. But I think one of the things that I felt was his example that he talked about in phenomenology and art was the fact that there was really much more of a kind of consequence of constructive or generative capacity than most people really kind of gave it. Now, that was something that allowed me to kind of think of that within the greater realm of architectural construction. Now, by construction, I don't necessarily mean putting bricks together. I mean in a kind of sense of kind of creating artifacts within a composite circumstance. Over time, I started to see the entangled nature as something that, and I think this kind of had to do with kind of reading Darwin, is that though Darwin wasn't, I would say, literary enough to understand the consequence of the idea of metaphor, he did describe the way in which things basically are plastically enhanced within and without other things. So as a result, I started to see that generative capacity. And then this was another benefit of kind of like, having friends outside of my own discipline, was that I saw this concurrent kind of reality that I kind of had kind of come to the fact that we kind of live in this process of generation. And this process of generation is things basically kind of coming unforeseeable from other things. And that was something that I kind of have probably has evolved over the last kind of like 5 to 10 years, but it was definitely very different than just understanding the kind of beauty of the craft of generating metaphors. So
we'll continue with my lexicon.
Say.
Microarchitecture, macroarchitecture, scale shifting, which is something I do in my painting, drawing, and writing constantly. And it is a game that I play in my own mind when I see things. I shift the scales of those things in front of me like pieces on a chessboard. It's kind of a visual hobby.
I would say in that case, very true, because I think what happens is because of the way in which, I think because of the way in which you kind of put these pieces together, you understand the necessity of the fact that in the organic world, there is a multitude of simultaneity that we don't necessarily always appreciate in our world, especially in terms of our constructions and our arts. I mean, it's possible for it to take place, but I don't think it's something we kind of utilize or exploit far and anywhere near enough.
The other word I agree is continuum.
Okay.
I do find when I'm writing, especially, there is a wide, flat, eternal plane with no endpoint that stretches out, and the science fables that I write are only terminated when I create a termination point. And the termination point I create is my artificial point that I craft. But the story goes on past the termination point that I write down.
Okay. Well, let's bring up a word that's common to both of us, which is adventure.
Oh, yeah.
Describe the character of the adventure that exists as you see it in the way in which you generate and create.
That's a very beautiful question.
Well, it was similar to the idea of like the fact that you could kind of see a character of the lexicon itself. I would say if you were to define that, which is the way in which you tell me who this is. Okay.
Cool. Is it relevant?
Nope.
Okay. So in terms of the adventure, What excites me is coming across a really unexpected idea. And actually, the science often precedes the art in my case, meaning I will read a research article in the journal Science, and I will get excited about the discovery or this branch of research. And the research that excites me, though, is embedded in my lexicon, plant science. The word mycology is something that I use all the time. I'm actually fascinated by it. And I see most of the natural world as its own mycological substrate because it is. What is underground is vast and is wholly responsible for what is growing and living above ground. I mean, the incredible dialogues of trees, of plants that people think are totally unconnected, are all having a robust subterranean mycelial conversation. So these are words that come up all the time. So meaning the word arbuscular comes up all the time. Ectomycorrhizal is part of my lexicon.
Endosymbiosis.
Yeah.
Ectosymbiosis. I mean,
and symbiosis.
In my case, if I was to say
commensal.
commensal, right,
Yeah.
amenal, right, and commensalism, amenalism. I think if I was to kind of say in terms of what I would see as adventure, I see adventure as a kind of like a love between my curiosity and imagination. But when I look at the character of those things, I see an innocent, childlike attitude. I would say that like it's two young children who are kind of fascinated with each other, who enjoy playing with each other and kind of like presenting each other with challenges. So I do, and I've always kind of remembered when I was little that nature of kind of like going off on my own and kind of coming across something and kind of just saying like, oh, I want to stay here and kind of figure out what this is. And to me, even today, when I sit in front of a drawing or I kind of start to construct a model or I kind of try to read something or put something down, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, what's that? You know, like I was saying today, like I figure if I was to have a place in politics, it would be Minister of Shiny Objects. You know, and I think I've always just found that kind of childlike curiosity of just kind of adventuring out among things and kind of finding certain things that had a certain appeal. You know, in fact, we were speaking with some friends tonight, and they were asking me about how I kind of ventured off in this kind of way as far as I had on my own. And I said I never really kind of thought of it so much as a being by my own, as just as if like I just kind of trusted my impulse, that my intuition was kind of moving me in this direction. And it was, I mean, again, it could have been a waste and it could have been nothing. Still could be a waste, could be nothing. But the point was, it was what drew me. It was what kind of made me think, hey, I want to, what's up that way?
Okay.
You know? Yeah, go ahead.
So the adventure you were asking me, which is an excellent question, is when I find a new idea, something really mind-blowing, really unexpected, and my imagination is fired immediately and the engine kicks right in, and I arborize that discovery and find 3, 4, 5, 6, a dozen ways that I can manifest the research I just read and absorbed visually. That is my lexicon. Is the linguistic, and one of my favorite words is transcription, transcribe.
I like that word. Yeah, I like that.
So my transcription, which we both use quite a bit, is just a sublime word for a transformation that deepens the understanding of the original, yet is the creation of something entirely novel,
True. And I think
right?
that was, yeah, I think, it's funny. We talked about copying and drawing a few weeks ago. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what I would say is that one of the things that I employ when I do a drawing of an object is I employ that idea of a transcription in the
Mm-hmm.
fact that the information that was basically established initially by
Ah,
the
right.
person who created this object. And it's also partially
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to copy the object to make it look like the object. I'm trying to find the essence of the object, not its resemblance, as they
Mm-hmm.
talked about. So the idea is that what I'm seeing is there's a series of ideas, concepts, and character that are embodied in the object that I feel are important and now have to be put in a different, in a different form, just the way that somebody would basically
Mm-hmm.
transcribe from the mandolin to the guitar, or from the clavichord to the harpsichord, or
Or the
harpsichord to the
piano to a
exactly.
full orchestra.
Exactly. So the thing is, I think one of the things that makes a drawing capable of kind of originality is the fact that the transcription is giving new light to the information.
I'd like to bring up a great example of
Yeah,
that
sure.
in classical music. Yes, please have. We can switch
Yeah.
because I prefer that. You
Mhm.
prefer that.
Mhm.
We have
Yeah.
our preferences.
Yes.
Is Modest Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition was originally composed for solo piano. And no one now has ever heard it that way. And in fact, it's gloriously orchestral because Ravel transcribed it, altered it so tremendously, wonderfully, and successfully in a lush, haunting, captivating way, like the old castle. I mean, it is one of my absolute favorite pieces, but this lingers in the mind not as a solo work for the piano at all. It only exists for me and for certain others that have heard it as an orchestral work. And it's a very rich, layered, complex orchestral work.
I only know it as an orchestral work. In fact, when you told me it originally was kind of composed for the piano, I was kind of amazed. But I think one of the other things that's here is the fact that, like, the transcription is that place from which, and we'll talk about originality, and we talking about plagiarism, is that the real sin of plagiarism is the idea that this thing which is basically taken is not in fact, and makes it so, in my case, so criminal, is that it's not just the idea of kind of taking an idea and not kind of conjuring up, which to me just seems so gutless and just so worthless.
Cowardly.
Yeah, and it's also just like one of the things a genius wants to do is to assert his genius by showing his originality. And I think anyone who basically cheats, it's kind of like, it's like, you cheated. That's so pathetic.
Oh, it is, because they have no original.
Exactly.
Two very important
Say.
Yes. I jotted this down while I was drawing at the Met, and it's very important. These are the most vital lexicons of unmatched singularity from two of my favorite great minds. One is Maurice Maeterlinck, and if anybody here has not read works by Maurice Maeterlinck, get thee to a library.
Yeah, stop what you're doing right now.
Stop what you are doing.
And get out there.
He was, anyway, I will say that Maeterlinck, whose lexicon existed as a compound entity defined by, these are my own original notes, by the rigorous observations and hypotheses of a scientist and naturalist, the whimsical metaphorical language of a poet, and the grand epic scope of an opera composer and librettist. So Maeterlinck's lexicon is a tripartite masterpiece, because those three aspects of Maeterlinck cannot be separated. And I jotted down my thoughts the description I just read to you are my words alone
Mm-hmm.
of the way I feel, having read huge amounts of Maeterlinck's work, uh, both, his scientific works, his poetic works, none of which can be separated out.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, I
And
think. Yeah.
I will bring up my other choice, Jacques Tati,
Oh, okay. That's an
whose
interesting choice.
yes, whose visual and linguistic lexicon was an engine of surrealist invention, comedic dialogues of pantomime and satire in a silent mode, because there was very little for
Mm-hmm.
those of you who have not seen. I urge you to run out, rent,
Mm-hmm.
see Jacques Tati's films, specifically Mr. Hulot's Holiday, Mon Oncle, and Playtime. There's very, very little human speech or dialogue, which brings me to a different kind of lexicon, okay, through which he created exquisitely choreographed worlds, both insular and iconic, manifested as alien peninsulas off quotidian shores. And by that, I mean that most of the characters in Tati's films, you're doing interesting things with your
I know. I found those
eyebrows.
curious. That's interesting.
Yes, is these are offshoots. They're not an island of lexicons which exist. They're very tethered to very known types of people in French culture
Mm.
and society, very much known to French food, French sports, French holidays, French architecture, French engineering, and the personalities, likes, the commonalities, the preferences. He knew his fellow Frenchmen incredibly well. So these are peninsulas off the quotidian mainland of French culture, rather than an island adrift that had nothing to do with types
Mm.
that were
Mm.
known. There were
Mm.
very much types that were
Mm.
known.
Mm.
And finally, Jacques Tati's films, those vocal abstractions were fragments of known language. They were detached, incidental conversations, often between inanimate objects,
Mm.
between an organic life form, a person, and their objects.
Mm.
They were very, very, how should I say, almost mechanistic,
Mm.
and they didn't immediately land in a known linguistic form,
Mm.
but he created an entire lexicon
Mm.
of strange sounds of
Mm.
the
Mm.
everyday.
Mm. Mm.
Would you like to weigh in on these?
That's
These are
interesting. Kind of
my
reminds
these
me
are my
almost like
notes
of
here.
Satie.
Well, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
I guess in that case, I think that one of the things that I found interesting in this conversation
Mm.
is we've talked about the character of lexicons, and my case, my desire, my here was just basically to get people to understand that it's something that you create over the course of your life,
Mm.
and it's something you can be proud of, because it's actually maybe, one of your most fundamental achievements, one of your most fundamental creations. I mean,
Um,
most people, one of the sorry things that I see in life is that most people will never generate anything original. And even though it's impossible to
it's
live a whole life
tragic.
and
Yeah.
not create a lexicon, sometimes a lexicon you create can have so little originality in it that it's almost pitiful, right? Just the same way that people's generative capacity is so pitiful. Like I
Mhm.
said, I mean, 95% of people will never generate anything. In fact, one of the things that was kind of sad to me was that someone who was very important to me once uh, was something I was kind of saying about the fact that this person had been very important to me, had struggled with the idea of kind of finding that which was of their consequence. And this person said, and I never thought about this. And this is how naive I am. He said, most people never do. And when I thought about that, it was like,
It's really heartbreaking, isn't it?
It's heartbreaking, but it's
Also,
also kind of revealing because I'm thinking, oh, because in my life, the people around me
yeah.
do generate things. They
Well,
generate.
these are the people you choose to surround yourself with,
Yeah, but I never really
right?
thought about that. I mean, I just thought that
Mm.
everyone had found a sense of consequence. And then when
No.
this individual struggled with finding
Yeah.
that and it actually became an issue,
Mm-hmm.
this person said, "Oh yeah, most people don't." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, it's probably true.
Ooh.
Most people don't." So in
Yeah.
fact, that's one of the things that happens in a space where you can actually get a great sense of pride in that lexicon that you generate, that
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary. And this also goes to the fact we talk about this in terms of like plagiarism, we talk about
Well, yeah, I
copying,
have a thought
is
on
that
that.
some people inflate language
Mm.
in the fact that someone will use a term that has a much simpler synonym
Mm.
that could much rather kind of be utilized. In my case, I remember something Ortega said: clarity is courtesy. And one of the things that was always funny
Mm.
was a lot of contemporary philosophy is made to be incredibly obtuse and obscure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because it lacks consequence. But there were certain
It's
people
like a
like
curator's
Ortega,
wall text.
exactly,
Yeah.
that like Ortega, who were
Yeah.
incredibly eloquent, incredibly kind of like sincere, and incredibly clear. And I would say in case of like his lexicon, Ortega had a beautiful lexicon, and he really, really studied etymology. Etymology was at the heart and soul, just as it was for Heidegger, was at the heart and soul of the words that he used. He used them with such precision, such rapier kind of like, kind of
That's a
like
Julie word. I use
dexterity.
that as part of
Thank
my
you, P.
lexicon.
Thank you, P. So I think there's
Rapier,
also,
yes.
I mean, I would say in my case,
I
my
texted you
crafting,
today.
my craft.
I texted you that word today.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
My crafting of language is crude and simplistic. I
good.
say in my case, what I try to do in terms of my sincerity is to make sure that I use an appropriate word. And if I use something that needs to be defined, I will define that at the outset. So that way, when I'm using it, it basically becomes clear. One of the things that bothers me, especially being in the architectural and construction world, is the incredible, like the use of kind of like abbreviations and anagrams, and it's like, hey, tell us what that means before you use it. And I feel as if you want to use a term, define it before you use it, especially if it's going to be heavily utilized. But this idea of kind of like giving somebody something that isn't readily apparent is boorish, and it's crude, and it's kind of inconsiderate. And clarity is courtesy. And I think when one has an intricate, complex, beautifully well crafted idea, you want to make sure people get it. So I find that this idea among certain people, there are people who are just bad writers and struggle with writing. In fact, one of the things that Julie said when we first started to read Science Magazine together 30 some years ago was that it's so tragic that a lot of scientists are such incredibly poor writers.
They are. I mean, they're wonderful scientists, but they can't express or communicate
which is
their
tough.
ideas.
But at the sense of the fact that you want to kind of have, if you have something incredibly intricate, incredibly beautiful, you want people to understand why it is so.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I feel is most important. Clarity is courtesy. So next week, we'll be talking about the reader and what you read. So we're getting to the point of final thoughts, P.
But yeah,
Final thoughts, P.
Lots of
Well,
thoughts.
this was a great episode.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll kind of, and again, I think it's gonna, pieces of this will be be able to kind of get layered in some of the upcoming things as well. Say final thoughts, P.
One of my final thoughts is the jigsaw lexicon.
What's that?
Well, the jigsaw lexicon.
Now you're showing off.
Yeah, is when somebody who lacks originality fractures the greater lexicon of a great mind and truly original thinker and cherry picks little aspects of the stolen lexicon and then implants them in their own realm like a jigsaw puzzle. But it's kind of like if you're doing a puzzle and you rip off the tabs to make
Oh
pieces
yeah,
fit
pieces fit.
where
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah, yeah,
fit.
yeah.
And then you throw them down, and you take, say, a pie roll, and you try to roll them into the puzzle.
Yeah.
Now, a great example of that is many aspects of Jacques Tati's films have been made into these jigsaw lexicons of woefully untalented people. And I will name a Pee Wee Herman, like, literally stole many aspects of Jacques
Oh, did he?
Tati's visual world in Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, which is unwatchable and not very clever. See, the whole point is Jacques Tati was not the Three Stooges. He was incredibly sophisticated
That's
in
absolutely
his
that's
iconography.
incredibly
Right.
true. Incredibly
But
true.
those people who stole bits and pieces and tore off their arms and legs, and and used a pie roller to try to sort of roll these stolen bits and fragments of his lexicon. Same with Maeterlinck. You will see people try to write about science, nature, and the natural world using the poetry and the beautiful narrative, almost like fine fiction, in which Maeterlinck was the king. And what comes off is like a crunchy, hippy dippy kind of thing that doesn't sound at all like science, is terribly trite. Now, if there's one thing, Maeterlinck was never trite, and he was never mawkish, and he was never sentimental. So
True.
these people are using sentimentality, mawkishness in nature writing to try to make their hodgepodge of badly conceived, stolen lexicons from real writers of science and the natural world.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that like one of the things is that kind of like sentimentality is the poor man's romanticism. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
that is
kind of one of
also.
the things that I think happens. In fact, Mr. Spock made a point early on about like the fact that, he used the example of Green Goblin, and Green Goblin was too disturbing for people. Therefore, it had to dumb it down and make it kind of foolish and inconsequential in order for people to be able to kind of feel comfortable with it, which he's given to us as a kind of like a warning of, guys, stay true to yourselves. And the thing is, I don't think that's hard for us, because I don't think we know another way. For us, the only thing we've ever really thought about is trying to clarify those things that are within our minds. So anyway, that's our final thought.
Okay.
And let's kind of think about next week. We'll be kind of continuing this, but we'll be continuing it in terms of the books that we read. And as just the same way that the things that you say are very much a part of who you are, your lexicon is very much a part of who you are, so are the things that kind of generate those ideas from which you come, images and as well as books. And I think the reader, an idea that Julie kind of came up with like 25 years ago, is a kind of very important kind of thing. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of us all for us to maintain this. Thank you. And we'll see you next week. We'll see you on Wednesday for the preview, and next week for 49, The Reader.